So we are going to be continuing from where I ended last time. We are still looking at the factors for the rise of nationalism, and this time around we are going to be picking up from there. Look at those factors that inspired these Africans who are within Africa, and those ones that we are within diaspora, to have the strong love and feeling for one's nation. We are going to be continuing with where we stopped last time from, and this time around we are going to be looking at the formation of political parties in Africa. Also, this one led to what we call African nationalism. For instance, we had the United Gold Coast Convention, that was of Ghana. Then also we had the Conservation People's Party, it was in Ghana. Then talk about the African Congress, that was of South Africa. Uganda had what we call the National Congress. Then Kenya had what we call the KANU, that is the Kenya African National Union. And other leaders of these parties, these were people that were elite. They had all spirit, they had developed the spirit of nationalism because they had gone to school, they had acquired some knowledge and skills that they could use to spread their love and their love to these Africans who were within Africa and also those that were within abroad. So how did they do it? These people were capable. They had all connections from different nations. Since they are belonging to different parties, they geared in all the inspired other different nations also formulated these political parties that they could use now to demand for power or resist against the European domination or colonialists. These parties where these Africans or a number of Africans joined one party or other parties to fight against colonialism. That also led to the rise of nationalism, because in there, these people are spreading the love for their nations and also agitate for democracy. Then the other, we talk about the independence of Ghana, also influenced the growth of African nationalism as a point there to note. During and after the independence of Ghana, we are trying to see that Kwame Nkrumah clearly stated that the independence of Ghana would only be meaningless in terms of all to the rest of Africa. Still, the Ghana as a nation was still under what we call the colonial rule. Within some few time, we are trying to see that Kwame Nkrumah had to extend financial, administratively support to the nationalistic struggles against the colonialists in various parts of Africa. However, his nation was still under the domination of these colonialists. And therefore, we had now to organize the April and December Pan-African Congress in Accra. This one tried now to sensitize the participants that we are members by then to use it, or they used in the struggles, or they used in methods, or they taught them different methods and skills that they could embrace or try out to use in their different nations in order to fight against the European domination. People that tried to attend, we had we had different personalities. For instance, we had Tom Mboya. I talk about another prominent person known as Patrice Lumumba. These people, when they turned to their home, they are ready to struggle for the independence. So they started their campaigns to fight for their independence. So that one is also accounted as a factor for the rise and the growth of nationalism within Africa. Then the other that we can also talk about, the independence of Guinea. This one also in the same line. We shall say that we also people had now to borrow some ideas, or it was in terms of inspiration that Africans also decided now to stage a war against, or decided to have the struggling ideas against the Portuguese that were occupying Guinea in 1958. So within those years, we are trying to see that Africans also has tried now to revenge against the to fight against the Portuguese that had taken domination in Guinea. We also try to see that the Africans about the need for unity and cooperation against these colonies. They started now engaging into cooperation and unity to see that they also fight against that. Then the other thing we can also talk about is that we had what we call the Mau Mau Rebellion, that is of 1952 to 55 in Kenya, also led to shaped African nationalism. Following many years of oppression, talk about exploitation, where the Africans took arms against the British, which fought against the Africans in Angola. Then talk about Algeria and also other areas that the colonial oppression can be ended through the armed struggle. These people decided now to wage what we call the Brother Rebellion, also having seen their neighboring countries. For instance, talk about Tanganyika, that inspired them also to resist against the European domination or colonialism, hence increasing the love and desire of one's country into a war, yet to have then there are other words that we are formed. Then talk about what we call the formation of what we call the OAU, Organization of African Union. This one was formed on 25th. That was May. That is in 1963. This Organization of the African Unity was formed in order to ensure that all Africans could be united under one body that is known as the Organization of African Union. This was a continental body which aimed at promoting African unity, talk about also to ensure that all African countries had their independence, all became independent. They are saying that 32 countries, 32 independent countries, all African states, and also task others to carry out or to provide help to other African countries to also try now to get their independence. They are saying also that set up a liberation committee with its headquarters that was in Dar es Salaam. This one was in Tanzania, and it aimed at providing moral talk about financial, economic, military assistance to the liberation movements, such as what we call the ANC of South Africa, the Alliance of National Congress in South Africa. So assistance was given to those nations to ensure that they try to get rid of these Europeans or foreign dominance. Then the other, we can talk about what we call the external factors. The external factors we had what we call the Western education. You know what the Western education did here. We are trying to see that Western education colonization masters awarded scholarships to some of these African students who went to those nations and acquired some education. They studied from abroad. Upon studying from abroad, we are seeing that those students came out into contact with the white liberals or differentialists, talk about communists that were against the colonialism within these African nations. They are saying that they witnessed a democracy at the work in the European countries. Therefore, talk about also in America, where they wondered how democracy was passed on to these people. So this was also try to borrow some really from those areas. Some of these scholars that had acquired some scholarship, we had Ben Chiwanuka, talk about Nkwame Nkrumah, Jomo Kenyatta, and very many others from different nations. And those people had acquired some knowledge or had got some scholarship from these colonial masters. Therefore, these people came back here. They had now to separate the ideas of fraternity, liberty, and equality that shaped off or that geared into what we call nationalism in Africa at large. Then the other we can talk about is what we call the Communist Revolution. The Communist Revolution was organized in Russia in 1917. This one aimed at what we call the growth of nationalism, or it led to the growth of nationalism within Africa and within the world at large. Therefore, this one, we are seeing that the Russians criticized what we call communism due to the capitalistic policies that we are called on upon, seeing that the oppressed people of the world to see that they can rise against what we call the capitalistic oppressors. Therefore, the Russians went ahead and gave support to liberation movements in Africa, whereby they gave liberation to Angola. Then talk about not Zambia, it was called Zimbabwe. Then also another party in South Africa that was also in what we call Angola, where it was called PLUA, was also given an assistance. The PLU, it was known as the United African Party of Angola. It was also given some assistance in there. And therefore, we are seeing that also Russia has sent technical and financial help to NASA of Egypt and also to Guinea in order to see that these people can get assistance to try to fight against this European domination. They are saying to prevent the communist ideologies from spreading to all African countries. The capitalistic countries of Europe, especially Britain and France, started granting independence to these African states in Africa. Therefore, it led to the rise of the African nationalism at large within Africa and also the diaspora. Then the other that we can talk about is what we call the second, is it the Second World War? Yes, the Second World War. This one, the 21st World War of 1939 to 1945 also led to the growth of nationalism, where we are seeing that some Africans that went to serve into that war had acquired some colonial skills or tactics. So when they came back this side, they are able to implement some of the skills or teach some of the Africans that were at home. These people acquired skills. After acquiring skills how to operate the machines in terms of the guns, these people started now staging up wars against these Europeans. This one's trying to increase what we call African nationalism to these Africans that we have been East Africa or at Africa at large, so giving rise to what we call the African nationalism. Then the other we had is what we call the Pan-African movement. This Pan-African movement was formed in order to see that also these Africans could acquire independence. So when you look at the factors are too many. We can try to see there. We have what we call the rise of the Labour Party to power that was in Britain. Those are the external factors. Then what we call we had confluences that we are organized. They talk about the formulation of the African United Nations Organization. This African United Nations Organization was to replace, first of all, the League of Nations. On top of that, the UNO. One of its major aims, it was to set objectives to fight against what we call colonialism in all African countries. Then the other factors that we had the rise of USA and USSR, also led to the growth of nationalism. These people, all these two superpower countries, which replaced Britain and France, had wrong traditional hatred against colonialism, so it was a way how it had now to inspire or to influence nationalism. Then the other talk about 1945 Michigan Conference that was called upon. That was here some of the African leaders like Kwame Nkrumah, William of Nigeria, Kamuzu Band of Malawi, then also other people. Those are some of the things that we try to see that actually is try to lead it to what we call African nationalism and also other factors. Then talk about the Commonwealth countries. Also they criticized the what we call colonialism in Africa is also a factor. Then talk about other things. For now we are going to be stopping there. Then we shall be picking from what we call characteristics of African nationalism, where we shall be picking up next time from.